For over a century, the Panama Canal has been a central artery in the body of global trade. Roughly 5% of all maritime commerce flows through its 50-mile cut through Central America, connecting the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans and shortening shipping routes by thousands of miles. But today, the canal isn't flowing, it's choking. Water levels have dropped so dramatically that traffic has been slashed. A passageway that once handled 36 ships per day is now restricted to just 18. That's a 50% cut in global throughput through one of the world's most essential logistics corridors. This isn't just a shipping delay, it's a structural breakdown. Global trade relies on speed, precision, and predictability. The Panama Canal was designed to provide all three. But now, for the first time in its modern history, the canal is unable to fulfill its purpose. And this crisis isn't temporary. It's driven by something deeper. At the heart of the Panama Canal system is Gatun Lake, an artificial body of fresh water created specifically to operate the locks that raise and lower ships as they cross the continental divide. But Gatun Lake is drying up. The past 2 years have brought some of the lowest rainfall levels on record. In 2023, Panama received 30–40% less precipitation than normal. And early 2024 data shows even less. By mid-2024, the lake level had fallen to 78.2 feet, far below the safe operating level of 85 to 87 feet. This drop in water doesn't just mean smaller ships, it means fewer ships. To protect what water remains, the Canal Authority has imposed restrictions on daily transits, drastically reducing how many vessels can move through in a 24-hour window. Wait times have surged. At points in late 2024, over 160 vessels were queued, waiting days or even weeks to cross. For global exporters, this has turned the canal into a liability and pushed many to seek longer, more expensive routes around South America or through the Suez Canal. What was once a strategic advantage has become a logistical gamble. Here's what many people don't realize. The Panama Canal doesn't use ocean water like the Suez. It operates on fresh water, drawn directly from the watershed and funneled through its intricate system of locks. Every time a ship transits the canal, it consumes between 50 to 55 million gallons of fresh water. Most of that water is flushed out to sea with each passage. Multiply that by dozens of crossings per day, and the canal becomes not just a trade corridor, but one of the largest consumers of fresh water in Central America. The original design was ingenious for its time. When the U.S. built the canal in the early 1900s, rainfall in Panama was plentiful, and climate variability wasn't a concern. Today, that's no longer true. Long-term climate models show Panama's rainy season shortening and dry periods becoming more extreme. The country is now facing a new environmental reality that the canal was never designed to handle. And because the system depends entirely on natural rainfall, there's no man-made solution that can replace the missing water, no pipelines, no desalination plants, no quick fixes. This is a natural constraint on a global system. And it's one that the United States, despite building the canal over a century ago, can no longer control. The ripple effects of the canal slowdown are now hitting the U.S. economy hard. For decades, American supply chains were built around the assumption that Panama would remain a stable, reliable passageway between oceans. That assumption is breaking. Companies that import goods from Asia to the U.S. East Coast, from consumer electronics to medical supplies, are seeing shipping times increase by 2 to 3 weeks. That's because many vessels are being forced to reroute around Cape Horn, or in some cases, shift to cross-Pacific routes into California, followed by rail across the country. It's not just about delays, it's about cost. The price to ship a standard container through the canal has surged by up to 80% since 2022 due to water surcharges and priority auctions. Some carriers now pay over $2 million to secure a transit slot. Logistics companies are warning that this is more than a temporary bottleneck, it's a structural risk. And as shipping becomes less reliable, many U.S. importers are hedging by shifting operations to Mexican ports or investing in Gulf Coast alternatives. In other words, the long-term consequences are already being baked into new supply chain models with or without the canal. As pressure mounts, the crisis has become political. In early 2024, President Donald Trump reignited an old debate about the U.S. handover of the Panama Canal. At a campaign rally in January, he told a crowd in South Carolina,
"We built the Panama Canal, we paid for it, and now we're letting China run it? Maybe it's time we take it back."
The statement was classic Trump, populist, provocative, and legally impossible. Under the 1977 Torrijos-Carter treaties, the United States formally handed full control of the canal to Panama at the end of 1999. That treaty is binding under international law. It prohibits any future military or administrative claim by the U.S., and Panama, now a sovereign nation with strong regional ties, has no interest in reopening that agreement. Trump's remarks triggered a wave of responses from warnings by legal scholars to outcry across Latin America. The consensus was clear. Any attempt to take back the canal would not only violate international treaties, but could also destabilize U.S. relations across the Western Hemisphere. Behind the diplomatic drama and rising freight costs lies a more pressing reality. The Panama Canal, as a functioning system, is operating on borrowed time. According to engineers at the Panama Canal Authority, if drought conditions continue or worsen, as climate models predict, the current reduced operating schedule may become permanent. Worse, full shutdowns of lock operations could occur during future dry seasons, forcing months-long closures. This is no longer hypothetical. In the dry season of early 2024, authorities preemptively reduced the number of daily ship transits to 18, a level not seen since the canal's early years. In private briefings, ACP officials acknowledged that even this level may not be sustainable beyond 2025 without significant rainfall recovery. Long-term projections aren't optimistic. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, forecasts increased drought cycles across Central America, with Panama likely to face water stress for decades to come. Even if rainfall rebounds briefly, the underlying shift is structural, not seasonal. And there's another risk: Panama's growing population and urban demand for fresh water. Gatun Lake doesn't just serve ships. It supplies over 2 million Panamanians with drinking water. If the crisis deepens, the country may be forced to choose between the needs of its people and the needs of global commerce. In that scenario, the canal doesn't just slow down, it stops. And if that happens, the world won't wait around. Global shippers are already exploring alternatives. Permanent rerouting strategies are now on the table. And once trade routes shift, they rarely come back. Panama has made it clear: the canal belongs to Panama. President Laurentino Cortizo's January 2025 address reaffirmed the country's sovereignty in firm diplomatic terms. The Panama Canal is sovereign Panamanian territory. We are not in 1903, we are in 2025. It wasn't just a response to Donald Trump. It was a broader warning. Panama has no interest in becoming a pawn in another round of great power politics. But the reality is more complicated. While Panama owns and operates the canal, its economic dependencies are increasingly influenced and shaped by China. And that brings us to a deeper layer of this story. While American influence over the canal has waned, China has been quietly building leverage not through force, but through infrastructure, contracts, and long-term strategy. Today, Chinese state-owned companies operate the container ports at both ends of the canal. Hutchison Ports manages the Port of Balboa on the Pacific side, and the Port of Cologne on the Atlantic. Together, these are the gateways through which nearly all Panama Canal traffic flows. In 2017, Panama formally joined China's Belt and Road Initiative, becoming the first Latin American country to do so. Since then, Chinese firms have secured dozens of infrastructure deals, from logistics parks and data centers to a proposed fourth bridge over the canal currently under construction, which is being built by Chinese contractors. Beijing isn't hiding its intentions. This is long-term positioning, creating influence through economics rather than military force. And unlike the US, China offers something Panama desperately needs: capital. As the canal's water crisis deepens and Panama's economy slows, China is positioning itself not just as a trade partner, but as an indispensable infrastructure ally. The United States, for its part, remains largely reactive, issuing statements of concern, but offering little in the way of competitive alternatives. The consequences of the canal's slowdown are already spreading across the global economy. Shipping lines are being forced to adjust their most profitable routes. Some are rerouting around Cape Horn, a detour of up to 2 weeks. Others are shifting back to the Suez Canal, despite the increased distance for Asia-US East Coast cargo. In the first half of 2025, the average cost to move a 40-foot container from Asia to the US The East Coast rose by 30 to 50%, driven in part by Panama Canal constraints. These costs are passed down the supply chain, affecting everything from fuel and auto parts to clothing and household goods. Even insurance premiums are rising. Ships taking longer, riskier routes face higher exposure to weather, piracy, and mechanical failure. Some insurers have increased rates for vessels avoiding Panama by as much as 20%. And then there's the environmental cost. Longer routes mean more emissions. Ironically, what was once hailed as the Green Canal for reducing shipping distances is now indirectly fueling higher global CO2 output. Supply chains are also realigning. Major exporters like China, South Korea, and Vietnam are investing in alternate port infrastructure, including Mexico's Pacific coast and Brazil's Atlantic side, to bypass Panama entirely when needed. In global trade, flexibility is everything. And as the canal becomes less reliable, it's being written out of long-term logistics models, one spreadsheet at a time. Beneath the headlines, a quieter but more consequential shift is underway. The restructuring of global supply chains. Large manufacturers, logistics giants, and commodity traders are no longer waiting for the canal to recover. They're rerouting trade, signing long-term leases at alternate ports, and adjusting global inventory strategies. In 2025, several major shipping lines began diverting cargo to Mexican Pacific ports, like Manzanillo and Lázaro Cárdenas, followed by rail into Texas and the American Midwest. Others are increasing their use of Canadian West Coast ports, bypassing both Panama and traditional U.S. entry points entirely. In Asia, exporters are shifting to multimodal routes, sea to rail through the Middle East or direct to Europe via China's Eurasian rail links. The logistics map is redrawing itself not with headlines but with spreadsheets. And once those systems are in place, they don't get reversed easily. Trade flows are sticky. And if the Panama Canal fades as a global default, the U.S. won't just lose efficiency, it will lose relevance. For the United States, the most striking aspect of the crisis isn't the drought, it's the helplessness. America built the canal. For nearly a century, it was a symbol of U.S. engineering and global dominance. But today, under the terms of the Torrijos-Carter treaties, the U.S. has no military, legal, or operational authority in Panama. Even soft power has faded. China is now a larger trading partner to Panama than the U.S., and its infrastructure investments speak louder than Washington's policy statements. There is no legal path for the U.S. to retake control. There is no diplomatic leverage to force policy changes. The treaties are binding, the control is gone, and the power that came with it, strategic, economic, symbolic, is fading just as fast. As Panama struggles with water and the U.S. loses influence, another player is quietly building the future. China has long backed a proposed canal through Nicaragua, deeper, wider, and powered by Chinese capital. Though the project stalled due to environmental pushback and local protests, it was never canceled, and in 2024 discussions quietly resumed behind closed doors. But that's not the only option. In North Africa, Morocco is constructing a $25 billion megaport near Tangier, designed to become the largest logistics hub between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Backed by Gulf and Chinese capital, it may soon rival traditional Atlantic routes. In the 20th century, the Panama Canal changed the world by connecting oceans. In the 21st century, that connection may shift again, and this time, America may not be part of the new map. The Panama Canal isn't gone yet, but it's failing. And while Washington debates, the rest of the world is already adjusting. The question isn't whether the U.S. will take back the canal, it's whether it will still matter. We cover the geo-economic stories the headlines skip. We'll see you in our next video.